The second method we're going to cover is the method of placement called space. Basically what the space method does is it takes the entire length of the joint and it divides it up equally so that the distance between each tie rod will be exactly the same. Now that distance might vary. However, what we do when we select a method for space, PractiCAD opens up the option for spacing on in, and then we give it a value. Now the value we give here is not necessarily going to be the value between or the distance between tie rods. The value here means that we're telling PractiCAD if we say 6 inches for spacing on in, and we're in the space method of placement, we're stating that there better not be a gap between tie rods any larger than 6 inches. For every 6 inches, we must have a tie rod. However, the distance between those tie rods might vary a little bit depending on the odd value of the width of the duct. So just because we say space 6 inches, we might not necessarily get 6 inches exactly between the tie rods. For example, what we've got here on the screen is we've got the method of placement space on the right. And what we've done is we had set the value for 6 and we ran these tie rods down the line. Now you'll see what PractiCAD did was it actually took the entire length and it chopped it up so that we have equal distance between each tie rod. Even though the value we said was 6, PractiCAD uses that as the maximum distance allowed between the two tie rods. Here you can see from the edge we have 5.5 inches to the tie rod. And then in between each tie rod you can see it's marked by the dimensions lines. We have 5.5 inches. So what it did was it took the total length allowed between the two tie rods. It divided it up by the maximum spacing and it makes sure that they're equal in value. This is different from the next method we're going to cover, which is called space exact. What space exact means is that the spacing value we put here has to be the distance between the tie rods. Whatever value you put here, in this particular case we put 6, that will be the distance between tie rods in the center joint. For example, here you can see what happened was it made sure that between all the tie rods, after the ones on the end, in between the first and the last placed, when you're going across the duct, we have exactly 6 inches of space in between. This one was used with the space exact method. Now that would mean that the walls, or the distance between the walls and the tie rod, that space might be shorter. But after the first tie rod, every single tie rod here is going to have exactly 6 inches of space between them. And of course, the last one's going to have whatever the spacing was the first did. So essentially what PractiCAD does is it creates the first one, then it puts as many in between, centered into the fitting at 6 inches apart, and it adjusts the ends. With the space method, PractiCAD simply takes the total length from end to end, it chops it up into equal amounts with the value it cannot be higher than. So you won't get any spacing between the tie rods greater than 6, but you can see here we have it less than 6. Here what PractiCAD did was it decided to make exactly 5.5 inches in between each tie rod, rather than making an exact 6 inches in between the tie rods in the center and adjusting the ones on the end. So that is the difference between the space method and space exact. It is the same inside PractiCAD.